C3D cheat sheets has a bunch of cheat sheets for you that's free for download and viewing, and we're going to be talking about data shortcuts. So that's why I'm over on this tab to show you kind of what the instructions are, how to use them. Just a little cheat sheet to remind you about what to do and how to use them. Okay. So first things first, we're going to talk about a little bit about directory structure, and I received a kind of a screen capture from how BKF does their directory structure, so I thought I'd kind of bring this over for just a minute so we can kind of talk about that. So there is a K drive that I've understood that Mark Dickinson gave me, and underneath I have a template folder structure, and then there's a DWG folder where you place all of your drawings, and these are the different directories that you have. Okay. And there's a data shortcuts folder where you place a data shortcut. So kind of in the long and short of it, what a data shortcut is you want to be able to share different Civil 3D entities between different drawings. And the only things that you can actually share between drawings are surfaces, alignments, profiles, pipe networks, and then view frame groups. So those things are going to be able to be shared. And kind of the theory here is, why would you want to share between drawings when you can just X-reference and see that? So really you want to ask yourself the question is, do I need to share the actual Civil 3D data, or do I just need to see it for like a sheet layout? And if you're doing grading, or if you're doing corridors, or if you're doing some of the design side, you really have to have access to that data so you can daylight to it or extract information from that, label the actual object. And Civil 3D doesn't do that for you. Or sorry, not Civil 3D. AutoCAD doesn't do that for you through X-references. So you have to be able to combination of between X-references and data shortcuts. So a data shortcut is not actually a database. It's just a pointer. So it needs a place to place those, and that's where this data shortcuts folder comes in. We're going to place them in there. So we're basically going to go through the exercise of starting a project, how to set up the project, etc., from the beginning, and how to use data shortcuts. Okay. So I do want to kind of show you one other thing that if you didn't get printed out, I do have a couple of files that I did send that I have a couple of pictures that I've made just as an example on how you might want to deal with data shortcuts and where to place the drawings, etc. So you can see here, just briefly, I have a picture here that says, just like, for example, a road project structure, just as suggested. And you can kind of see the difference between there's an X reference, a data reference, and then there's these little green boxes that represent the Civil 3D object. So you can kind of see how we split them up here to actually set it up so we can actually share the work as well as keep things small and tight. And as you guys have been using Civil 3D, you can kind of understand, because as the drawing gets larger, more entities are inside it, tends to be a lot slower and also tends to crash more. Of course, Civil 3D crashes every now and then, but to kind of minimize that, you want to separate out your Civil 3D objects as much as possible. And the big reason is, one, you can share work between the project, and then, of course, two, you keep it small. And being much smaller, your computer doesn't use so much resources, and it actually stays open and it doesn't crash as much. So as kind of a suggestion here, how to deal with surfaces versus a plan drawing. This is kind of the structure I'll kind of go through just briefly to kind of show you why you might want to do this. But for an example here, a surface drawing, in my example here, a surface drawing I actually split into two pieces. And again, the suggestion for this is one drawing that contains only the entities used to build the surface. A lot of times you receive a drawing from, let's say, an aerial company or even your survey crew. They give you points or what have you. They might build the surface. But a lot of times there's a lot of extraneous other stuff that you need to X-reference into, but you don't need as part of the surface. So we like to split those up as much as possible, where the actual surface resides here. All the other stuff, like building outlines or existing utilities or trees, that kind of stuff that aren't really part of the surface, can be separated out. I'm a big proponent of actually separating these out to keep things small and tight. All right, so surface drawings, we try to split those up. What we call a proposed plan drawing, or a planimetric drawing, or a tentative map. Some people call it that. In this drawing, there's going to be no Civil 3D objects, and it's just two-dimensional only, just as a planimetric design, so you can use it as a guide for where you're going to do your design. For like a road structure, it might be where your center line is, that kind of stuff, just as a background of that. And again, this could be an optional thing. Some people don't like to do that as well. They like to put everything in their alignments drawing. But I like to separate these out, because you can always X-reference things together. So you'll notice here the proposed plan drawing is always X-reference. That's why it's yellow. You just use that as a reference and a guide for your design. Okay? And then kind of moving on, alignments and profiles, we'll kind of come back to this in a minute, corridors and pipes, and then a sections drawing if you're going to do those kinds of things. So you can see here, every different type of object will be in a different drawing. If it's just grading, you're doing maybe a parking lot design, you might have another category over here for just the grading drawing. And again, separating these out as much as possible for speed and ease of use. Okay. So what I'm going to do first is I have a job that I kind of started, faked it out here, and just kind of show you underneath here. There's some drawings, and I wasn't quite sure exactly where you placed your design drawings because there's obviously a bunch of these X arcs and an X reference. So just for now, I placed all the drawings that I did design in that X reference file, and I could be completely wrong how exactly those mean, but I wasn't quite sure what the X arch meant, arc I should say. Okay. So typically, what would normally happen is before Civil 3D even touched the data, I have this template folder. The directory structure I assume would be created. That's almost every single company I've ever dealt with. They create the directory structure so they can do correspondence and they can do the preliminary reports before the job is actually given to you and awarded to you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy the structure and I'm going to rename it to the new job number. Okay. And I have no idea what it might be, so I'm going to make up a number. So from this point, now we got to go and set up the actual Civil 3D project and talk about that as well. So I'm going to kind of jump back and forth here what I would recommend doing. I don't know who's responsible for that or who's going to be responsible for each office for doing that. But what I'm going to do is in the Data Shortcuts folder, kind of mirror this and also look at the document that's online, this PDF file. Okay, so I'm going to kind of mirror here. So the way that the Data Shortcuts work is you have to have a root folder where your project resides, and this is called the working folder. Okay. The actual project name is given to the name of the new Data Shortcuts folder. It has to have some kind of project name. And this underscore shortcuts, you have absolutely no choice in how this thing is named. It has to be called underscore shortcuts. So it basically needs a place to place this folder because it's going to house all those XML files that get created when you do it. So we're going to kind of go back and forth between how when you create a project and then we come back to here to kind of show you what's happening behind the scenes. So in this example here, the working folder, depending on how you want to do this. So I'm going to kind of show you what I've done already. So you can see underneath this 086052 project, for example, underneath the DWG, there's a data shortcuts. And then there's the underscore shortcuts folder. So to kind of keep in line with this form over here, the actual project name is called data shortcuts. The root folder, the working folder, is actually the DWG, because that's the root to the project to here. So depending on where you want to put this is where the project has to be. And again, I was kind of confused exactly how you put where you put the project, if this underneath data shortcuts is actually a project name or if it's just the underscore shortcuts. Okay. So we're going to kind of keep in line with this and showing you how to do this as well the same way with our 0999 project. So let me come into here. So right now, underneath data shortcuts, it's completely empty. So first things first, before the project's even begun, as far as CAD touches the project, you want to set up the Civil 3D project. Okay, so I'm going to open up Civil 3D here, and I'm going to go make sure my tool space can be seen instead of hiding. Okay. So kind of procedure here is back to this guy down here. Just make sure I can show you where I'm going. First thing is you want to make sure you set the working folder. And hopefully you guys can remember, because I tend to jump back and forth, our working folder in this case is called DWG, the root folder to our data shortcuts. So if you can think about it, your working folder is going to be DWG for every single project you do. You'll have to change that for every different project. Okay. So when I'm going to come over here, I'm going to right-click on data shortcuts, and I'm going to set the working folder. That's step one. And this time I'm going to go to the 999 DWG. So now that's the working folder. You see how this path is empty now, and the reason for that is underneath that working folder, the DWG, it does not find any underscore shortcuts folders anywhere. So there's really no project. So the first step is to set that root folder. So we got DWG. The project name is actually going to be called data shortcuts. Okay. So this data shortcuts, what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to right-click on data shortcuts, and a new Data Shortcuts project folder. All right, so that's going to go ahead and create the folder structure for the underscore shortcuts. Okay, so you'll see here underneath the DWG folder, and this is where you can get confusing. The Data Shortcuts folder already exists, so I have to type it in again here. And if I misspell it or if I fat finger the keyboard somehow, I will create a new folder. So I'm going to come back into here, and hopefully don't fat finger the keyboard. Okay, called exactly the same. This project template, you guys are probably not going to be using that because your directory structure is already set up. This is going to be for underneath the DWG folder if you want to create other folders. We're not going to use that in this case. So Data Shortcuts, I'm going to hit OK. What happens now is that you should have this thing filled out. It should tell you where the data shortcuts are. So for now, you got to keep track of this number here, your project number, to see where your data shortcuts are. So if I look externally, kind of what happened there, underneath the data shortcuts, I now have a shortcuts underscore shortcuts folder. Again, I can't change that name. And there's where I'm going to place my different shortcuts. Okay? So really, the only thing the user would have to do is make sure you have the right working folder and the right data shortcuts folder. Okay? Once that's done, you don't have to worry about placing them in here. Whatever's in here is going to be listed in this list over here. So again, those are the first two things you want to do before you even let Civil 3D touch the thing, to make sure you have the project set up. Now, if you have somebody dedicated in each office doing that, or the project manager, or whoever might do that, once you have done it once, you're not creating data shortcuts, the data shortcuts folder anymore. You're just linking to it at that point. Okay. So for example, just to show you go back and forth, now I have two projects in here. One is the 086052, and one's the 099999. If I want to go back and forth between these guys, okay, as a drawing here, if I want to open up a drawing, you kind of want to be very cognizant about what your current data shortcuts folder is. Now, 2012 and above, I believe you guys are on Civil 3D 2012. When you save a drawing that has a data shortcut in it, it automatically attaches the project to it. So the next time that you open that drawing, that project gets set. So if you're switching between drawings and different projects, as long as there was a data shortcut made in that thing, it'll automatically switch this thing for you. But you still want to come over here and check this name out. This gives you a little clue about what's going on here. Okay? So for example, if I want to do this manually, and I want to go to another project, so I want to go back to my 086052 project, since the data shortcuts are underneath each one of these things, I would have to go and set my working folder again. So what you're doing is you're always setting to the working folder, the DWG folder of that particular project. So if I go to the DWG of 086052 now, you see how it's setting it for that one, and now I have my data shortcuts for this. Now you can see in this project I already have a bunch that are already made. But if I go back to the ones that I just did, the brand new project, set the working folder again, okay, and then back to my 09 DWG folder there. Okay, it switches, and notice I don't have any shortcuts now. So when you're switching between projects, that's probably the easiest way to do it for you guys. Set the working folder to the new project. Okay. So let me go ahead and close out of this drawing, and we'll set up a little scenario here. Let me go back to here. I have a couple of example files that I'll kind of walk through here. I'm going to grab some of these things. Copy. Again, I could be completely wrong on how you guys deal with where you put your drawings, but these are just like the design drawings, so I'm just going to go to the X reference and put them there. Again, hopefully I'm not too wrong, but hopefully you get the idea. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up my existing ground surface. Right now it's just a bunch of contours. Looks like that drawing was made in an older version. Shouldn't matter. So you guys are curious here, this is a job I helped with a little while ago. This is actually Maui, Hawaii, for those of you guys who, this is the west side of Maui here. They're doing a bypass, a highway bypass down here. So right down here is where the water is. But we're going to create a surface of this, and then once we create that surface, how do we share it into the different drawings? Okay. So I'm not going to go through the exercise of showing you how to actually build this stuff, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a surface, and I'm going to call it the existing ground. I'm not going to worry too much about what it looks like, so I'm just going to notice, well, actually I should probably say 2 and 10 background is fine, so we can actually see some changes. Okay. And I'm going to build a surface. I'm going to cut it out quite a bit. It's going to look kind of funny. All right. So I now have a surface in here, and you can kind of see over here in the prospector, underneath surfaces, there's my EG surface. But you'll notice here it's not down here. Okay? So once I'm comfortable with building the surface, let's say I am at this point, I'm not really too worried about how accurate it is. The next step is once I have the right data shortcuts folder, I'm going to right-click Data Shortcuts and create data shortcuts. Now what I don't really kind of like about the way that Civil 3D does this is they don't put these in order. So the first thing we did was the set working folder, then we did the new, and then we're creating data shortcuts, so you can kind of see it's backwards, but I guess that's the way it goes. And of course, looks like I have to save the drawing first. So again, right-click Data Shortcuts. So this is the interface to let you know what objects do you want to share to other drawings. Now there might be some drawings or some surfaces or some other things that you don't want to share. So what's nice about it gives you the option. So if it's like a dummy surface that you're kind of playing with and you don't really need to share that, you have that option. Okay, the minute that I do this, I'll hit OK. Current drawing has now been associated with the project. Okay. So the next time I open this drawing, hopefully it should set it back to this particular project. Now you should also notice that I have a surface name that's EG. Okay. So let me kind of show you what happened behind the scenes when I did that. So it doesn't actually export out this surface. It just creates what's called a pointer file. All right, I just got a question. I'll take a quick second. It says, what do the numbers mean that when you change the building of the surface? You were talking about these things here, right? These are weeding factors and supplementary factors. What I did is I just weeded out a bunch of the vertices because it takes every single vertice of the contour, and I wanted to make it huge so it would cut out a lot out, so it would make it faster because this is a pretty large surface. So hopefully that answers that question. I can go over a lot more of that, but I'm going to cancel that for now. But that's what those numbers are. For weeding and supplementary, we'll be adding. So I just made these things big. I think is what I did was 150. That's what I think it was. Okay. All right, so behind the scenes, back to it. So what I just did is I opened up this drawing. Obviously, you can kind of see that it's a little bit bigger now. But once I've done that, you can see in here underneath the data shortcuts, underneath that shortcuts folder, if you remember that's the one that got created, this is the folder structure that was automatically created for us. Underneath surfaces, there's now this ridiculously named file. Okay. So just to kind of show you what it looks like, move this over here. Let me see if I can open it with an XML editor so it looks a little bit better. All right, so this is the actual file that it creates. So it's not creating, it's a very tiny looking file. You can kind of see there's the shortcut name. It's connected to the EG surface. That's where the drawing is going to be resided, and there's the name and this handle and all this stuff is like the database stuff. So what an XML file is, this file that just got created, is just a pointer. So whenever you access this XML file, it knows where to get the drawing and where the surface is. Okay? Which comes up with a possible problem. Meaning is, if I go through the exercise and I realize that later on, all right, this drawing is located right here, if I move that somewhere else, the data shortcut is no longer valid. Okay? Can't find it. Just like an X reference, if you move an X reference, it says I can't find it. Well, how do I correct that? We'll get into that as well. Okay? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this drawing. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new drawing. And I'll just use a default template. I assume you guys have your own, but I'll just use this default one. Okay. In order for you to use data shortcuts, you must have a named drawing somewhere. So if I try to create data shortcuts, just to make sure here, you see how it's grayed out. I can't create any references to these objects until I actually save this drawing somewhere. So I have to have a saved name drawing. So in the 00999 X reference, I'm going to call this one alignments and profiles. And I bet you can't guess what I'm going to put in there. But anyway, okay. So fairly typically, the existing ground is the basis for all the design. Right? You got to have that existing ground before you can do some of the design to calculate your volumes and whatnot. So I need to have that surface to start with. So typically, you're going to create a new drawing. So I'm going to talk about the alignments and profiles now. So we're kind of doing this here. I'm going to skip back to this. We just created a surface. I didn't create two different drawings. It's a very simple drawing for my surface. So I've now created an EG file. Next thing is I've already had this done. I'm now in this alignments and profiles. Okay. So depending on the job, you can see here there's three options that I put down here. All alignments and all profiles reside in this one drawing. Okay. Option 2, you have a separate drawing for each alignment and profile combination, or you have a separate drawing for each alignment and each profile. Option 3 is probably the most robust, but there's going to be quite a lot of drawings. In this example, I have 2 alignments. So I'm going to show you why it might be necessary to have different drawings for alignments so you can have different people working on the alignment, etc. It doesn't always happen. I mean, if it's a small project, it might be nice to have it all in one drawing. But then again, you got to think about it in crunch time when you got to share the work with 10 other people who are trying to get it done. Do I want to go through the exercise of placing these all in different drawings so everybody can work on the different ones as necessary? That's kind of a judgment call you want to make at the time of the project. Okay. So almost all the time, what's going to happen here is I'm going to go and right-click on the EG. I'm going to create a surface, or sorry, not create a surface, create a reference. So again, the terminology was we set the working folder so we can place where these were. If I want to actually access this EG surface, remember this is in another drawing. I'm going to go ahead and create a reference to that other surface. So when you do that, it's actually accessing that XML file. So if I can't find that XML file, or if the XML file is wrong, if this existing topo file is moved, it's obviously going to have a problem finding that. Okay. I'm just going to set this to border only so I can see only the border. And that's probably not the best idea, but here's my border. I'm going to actually change that because I just thought I have to do something, so bear with me. Okay. All right, so here is the surface. And a couple of things that you might note is it's very similar to an X reference. If I click on this thing, right, in 2012 and above, you get a ribbon that comes up here. Now this ribbon, you can see here, there's surface properties. There's also the Synchronize, open source, and promote. This is not available to us in the other drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch. So I just did a Control-Tab. For those of you who don't know, the Control-Tab will switch between open drawings. It's kind of a quick way to do that. And sure is acting slow. Sorry about that. So when I click on this surface, you'll notice here the ribbon looks a little different. The two things that you'll notice here that are different is there's an Add Data and an Edit Surface. The whole point of having a data shortcut is you cannot edit it, just like in an X reference. You X reference something somewhere, you'd have to open the drawing. I guess you can technically use ref edit, but it's physically opening the drawing, changing it, and saving it. So I cannot edit it in the other drawing. Okay. So here's kind of what happens here. I'm going to go and do an example here. I'm going to take this surface and I'm going to do a ridiculous edit here. I'm going to add a point so it's very obvious. And right now the elevation of that is 11, so I'm going to make it 50. So I just made a hill right there. Okay. So very similar to X reference. What I want to do is I'm going to come back to this other drawing. I just did a Control-Tab again to get back to the other one that's linked to it. Okay. And you'll notice here that nothing's changed. All right. The whole reason for this is just like in an X reference, I have to go back and actually save the drawing before anything updates. It's basically like kind of a save and then a reload like an X reference. With a data shortcut, they call it save, and then it's synchronize is what they call it. So I just made a ridiculous edit to the surface. Wherever that thing is referenced now, I just saved it now. Okay. After saving it, go back to the drawing. You'll notice this thing just popped up. This typically only pops up if you're the only one in the drawings. If someone else is in the drawing and makes a change, it doesn't always come up. Okay. So I'm going to pretend here that it didn't come up. I didn't see that happen. Okay. There is an icon down here at the bottom right that shows you that there is a data shortcut reference. This is only existing if you do have that. It's a little tiny icon. Hopefully you can see that in the bottom right. Okay. What also kind of tells you what's going on is if I go into the surfaces, okay, sometimes you'll see a little icon that says it needs to change. But if I right-click on EG here, you'll see there's a Synchronize and a Promote. I also, if I click on the surface, there's a Synchronize and a Promote. Okay. So if I synchronize at this point, so again, if that thing pops up, I just got to click on it and do it. Otherwise, I can right-click on this and synchronize, click on it and go to synchronize, or right-click over here and go to synchronize. Now, if you're in the drawing to manual synchronize, that's what you have to do. If I got out of the drawing and opened it back up, that does the same thing, just like in a next reference. So hopefully there's my ridiculous edit that I made. Okay. So again, once a data shortcut is linked, it's going to update that every single time. All right. So far, hopefully, piece of cake. So that's the synchronize, etc. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn the surface off just to keep things a little speedy. Okay. So again, recommend, especially on a surface, it's a pretty large surface, turning up the contours during the design process will really speed up the drawing quite a bit. Okay. So again, I can't edit it. The only thing that I can do to this surface is label it, analyze it. I can color code it, or I can daylight to it. I can get volumes, that kind of thing. I just can't edit the actual contents of the surface. I can just change the way it looks, or label it, or analyze it, which is probably a good thing. So we're kind of at this step right now here where we have the surface drawing. I'm in the alignments and profiles. I brought the existing ground surface in. You can kind of see here this red is, again, a data reference. I reference it into here. And again, that would be for grabbing the profile. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I need to X-reference that drawing in. And again, I'm X-referencing the base in because there's no civil 3D objects. So, oops, not P. You guys are in K. 099, drawing, XREF, and there's the base drawing that I've already made. Okay. All right, so I made up this little example here. So now at this point, again, this is from the X reference. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to make an alignment of this thing, these two guys. I'm just going to do it in one drawing just because in the interest of time here, but hopefully you get the idea. All right, so I'm going to go to the alignments, create from objects, do an X for X reference, pick it. Yep. Lack of imagination, I'm going to call this one the Big Street. And I'm not too worried about naming this. I'll start at 100. Okay, so I have an alignment. Hopefully underneath alignments, centerline alignments, there's my Big Street. Now at this point, you're going to want to decide, do I want to actually place all of my alignments in one drawing? Some people like that, some people don't. And it depends on how you want to share the work. Hopefully that was the explanation I had between this option 1, 2, and 3 here. Okay. So for now, I'm just going to create 2 alignments from objects, X reference, pick, reverse. This will be small street. Start at 100, yada, yada. Okay. So there are my 2 alignments. Okay. All right, so in the interest also, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create some profiles that are completely fake and kind of show you around with those as well. So underneath these guys, let me just do I'll create a profile view really fast. Grid, create, I don't care what it looks like. And another profile view for my small street. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to create a profile, a surface profile for each one of these guys. Okay. Oh, looks like it doesn't like that all at the same time. Getting a little too fancy here, I guess. Okay. All right. So there's my existing ground, etc. So you can see, again, underneath this, there's my profile for each one of these guys underneath the surface. So again, I'm going to do a very quick job here of profile creation tools. And I'm going to call this one Big FG. And I'm just going to do some fake stuff in here. There's my centerline design of that guy. And here's the centerline design of this one. So this will be small FG. Okay, that's how I design all my center lines that quickly, of course. All right. So again, you can see here there's a small, there's the alignments, there's the big FG and the small FG, right? So what I'm going to do now is, in order to have this design, let's say I'm going to create another drawing for a corridor. I don't want to do the corridor in here. Again, you want to keep these objects separate as much as possible. Okay? So at this point, I need to go ahead and create data shortcuts. So I have some objects in this drawing. I'm going to minimize this over here once I get my control back. So underneath alignments, there's nothing underneath here because I haven't actually exposed those to the project. So again, I'm going to right-click and create data shortcuts. And these are the available ones that I have. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to share everything, but I don't want to share the existing ground surface profile. The reason why I don't do that is it's kind of redundant. If I do need to see that existing profile somewhere, I always have the existing ground surface, and I don't need to grab the profile itself. Besides, these aren't very named very nicely. So I'm just going to grab this small. You'll notice here, when I pick on the profile, I must get the alignment as well. The alignment being the parent object, as they call it, the profile being the child. The parent has to exist before the child. That's kind of the way that it works. So when I do that, underneath centerline alignments, you can kind of see they are there, but the way that they're stored is underneath each other. Child parent is what they call it. Okay. So when anytime I hit the create data shortcuts in my Explorer over here, I'm going to come back to my 999 and go to my alignments. Right? I still have two alignments, and those are those fun-looking things. All it is a pointer file. It even tells you, please do not edit this file. Okay? You edit this file, you can obviously screw some things up. Okay? And then same thing under profiles, they're over there as well. So externally, they kind of split them up, but the way that they do it internally is they put them child and parent. Okay? All right. So again, what's kind of nice about this is I'm going to go ahead and close this drawing down. Maybe I shouldn't use such a big surface. And I'm going to go ahead and close this one as well, save some more time. All right, so now I'm going to just do a quick corridor. So at this point, we're now here. So we've created alignments and profiles. I'm going to create a corridor drawing, and you can see this is red here. I'm going to create a data reference to these objects. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and X-reference in the base. Okay. I also need to grab my existing ground. So almost every single time, the way that I work is I'll create a whole new drawing with a different type of object that I'm creating, whether it be a corridor, whether it be pipes, whether it be grading, whether it be sections. I'm creating a new drawing and referencing what I need. Okay. So new drawing. Save as, and I'm going to call this one corridor. All right, so again, I'm in the same project, so I'm going to right-click on EG, create a reference. This time I'm just going to do border only to save some speed here. I don't know if you saw that. It's kind of going kind of quick. But every single time that you grab a data shortcut, it automatically associates it with the drawing, every single time. If you just start a new drawing and don't do any data shortcuts, it doesn't automatically assign it to a project. So there is a little bit of distinction there. All right, so at the same time, I need to get the profiles and the alignment. A little trick here. If I go ahead and grab the profile and bring that in, by definition, the parent has to come with it. So I don't have to grab them both if I don't want to. So if I right-click on the profile and create a reference, the alignment must come with it. There's no other way that can happen. So I can save the step if I wanted to. So you can see the alignment came in as well as the profile. So again, underneath surfaces, I got that little funny little shortcut icon that tells me it's coming from a shortcut. And also underneath the big E, the big street, and there's my big FG. So they both came in. That's just by definition. So sometimes you can save a little time that way. So they came in. So I reference in what I need. I'm going to X-reference another drawing, the base drawing. That's pretty typical. So I'll grab the base. Okay. Just so I have a reference to see where I am if I need to grab something or see where my stationing is or what have you. Okay. All right. So far, piece of cake, hopefully. So again, kind of down the line. So now at this point, I'm in my corridor drawing. I've now set it up to where I have the entities that I need, and now I have to create the corridor. Again, in the interest of time here, I'm going to grab an assembly really fast here. I guess it should have been really fast. I don't know why it's kind of freezing here. Okay, so that's going to be my road. That's just coming straight off of the basic tool palette coming from Civil 3D. So I'm going to create a corridor on just Big Street, and using that profile, using that assembly. And I'm just going to create a small one here just to make sure that we're all good and fine. Okay. All right, so there's my corridor. One mistake that I made, I'm going pretty quick though, so I didn't tell it to daylight to surface. All right. Nice. That's what I get for designing those profiles that way. All right, so I have a corridor. I'm happy with what I got. Now the problem here that you guys might foresee is that a corridor cannot be shared. It's not part of the data shortcuts. So there's nothing that I can do. I can X-reference that somewhere, but I can't analyze it. So really the only option if I need to share some part of this is to create a surface from the corridor and then share that surface. That would be the typical procedure, is you create a finished ground surface. So if you're doing pipes, for example, and I want that finished ground surface to be part of my pipe design because I need to do cover checks and I want to make sure that my manholes or what have you got the right rim elevation, that kind of thing. So I would create a surface for that. So just to be very quick about that, corridor surfaces, create one. I'm going to call it top. Hit it, go, and delete. All right. So I just created a surface of that thing. All right, so you can see now, you can see there's my surface. You see it doesn't have a little shortcut icon, meaning that I can't save that. I'm sorry, it's not part of the project, sorry. It's only part of this drawing. So if I need that, for example, back to kind of throw you back in the mix here, is we're in the corridor drawing. You can see this little FG I just created. If I created a pipes drawing, then I would bring in the FG surface to that so I could use that in order to get my right cover checks and my right rim elevations, that kind of thing. Okay. I'm going to skip over that because we're running out of time. I do want to show you the sections drawing because this is a feature that a lot of people do not know. So I want to first do that. So I'm going to save the drawing. And then from there, come on. All right. So I'm going to right-click on this guy, create data shortcuts. You'll notice that the other options, the only thing that I have in this drawing is the top. Obviously, the other things are shortcutted, so I can't use those. So, okay. So you can see here, if you follow some kind of a procedure, every single drawing that you create another Civil 3D entity in, whether it be a surface, some grading, which is also kind of like a surface, a corridor, alignments, if you separate those up from drawings, I can get whatever I need very quickly through this. So I keep the drawings nice and small, tight. One object per drawing is ideal, but that's not always the case. That way, everybody can work what they need to, and they can always pull information to get it in there. Okay. Ideally, that's the way it would be nice, but obviously, depending on projects, things do happen. Okay. All right, so let me close this drawing down. There is a caveat here, and the reason I kind of say this, let me go back to here. That's the wrong one. So corridors. Corridors are a very, very large object. If you have large, or sorry, it's a powerful object. It takes a lot of CPU power to deal with a corridor. Because of that, I always recommend do not place sections and corridors in the same drawing. The minute you add sections to a drawing, especially a corridor, the corridor becomes very slow. And the way that that Civil 3D has got around this is the sections drawing. You do not, because you can't data shortcut a corridor. The way they got that around this is you can actually X-reference. See how this is yellow? You can X-reference the corridor drawing into a sections drawing and still get the corridor. Okay? So that's the trick that I'm going to make sure you guys knew about, was if I need to do sections, I don't have to place them in my corridor drawing, even though I can't take the corridor and shortcut it out. So I'm going to explain that here. Sorry about the wait here. So you can see here, there's my alignments and profiles, the corridor, and now I'm going to create a sections drawing. Again, there's nothing in this one. And I'm going to X-reference in the corridor. This is a little different than you might be thought about it because, again, a corridor can't be a data shortcut. They've limited that. So I physically X-reference that in. The only thing else that I actually have to have, particularly in this drawing, is I do have to have an alignment, because the cut sections you have to have an alignment. So just to brief you here, I'm going to go ahead and add the alignment for my big street. Yeah, whatever. So I do have the alignment, and I'm just going to be really quick about this. I'm going to create some sample lines, if you guys are familiar with that. But notice here, when you create sample lines, this is part of the procedure that Civil 3D requires. You'll notice here I'm getting the existing ground surface, and I'm getting the corridor, and I'm getting the corridor top surface that came from that X reference. So somehow they figured out that if you X reference in the corridor, I can actually extract that information. Which then leads me to believe is, well, why couldn't they do this for all objects, but just X reference it instead of having to deal with data shortcuts? Well, unfortunately, they didn't do that. So for now, it's just corridor stuff that allows you to do X reference. Okay. And so I'll just create a couple of sections. Oops. From 1,000 to 2,000, I think is what I did. Cool. All right. So you see here I just created some sections. And then, again, briefly, I'm going to go to my create multiple views for that thing. I'm just going to draft it, and I can worry about that. Good enough. Boom. Okay. So you see here I've created a section from an X reference. So I just want to point that out. If you have a corridor, you can do it through an X reference now, and you can see it does come up. Now, of course, you might have your own styles and whatnot, but that's beside the point at this point. Okay. So to kind of reiterate what I've done is, again, the best opportunity that I can suggest is to separate out your drawings as much as possible. 1, it's going to be faster. 2, it's going to be more stable. And 3, you can have multiple people working on different parts of the project much more easily. Okay. As long as you can put them through, so now you got to ask yourself, do I want to X reference something, or do I want to data reference something? So you can remember the sections drawing, you're allowed to X reference. Okay. Same thing with the proposed plan, because there's no Civil 3D objects anyway. But do I need the existing ground, etc.? So if I'm doing some sheets, if I'm bringing in my title block, I'm doing some paper space viewports or what have you, most of the time I'm X referencing in those things into the sheet just so I can see them and open up a viewport. Okay. A couple of things that I do want to point out is, remember, when you data shortcut something, that brings the data over, then I can label it, etc. But there is a caveat to that. This thing right down here. Okay. In 2000, I think 9, 8, I can't remember exactly. 9 is when it came up. Yeah, I even put that in as 9. So we're in 2012. You can actually label a Civil 3D object through an X reference. Okay. If you guys remember, I X reference this in. This guy right here is an X reference. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to annotate that object. I'm going to add a surface label and a spot elevation. Select the surface or plus enter, so I'm going to select the surface. Notice here, I selected the surface through an X reference, and I can label it. Now, the reason why I point that out is you can still X reference in objects to a sheet, and you can still label it over there if you like. Okay? But I would recommend, if you need to have a bunch of labels, do it like you normally might and put it in the master drawing or place it that way. Because if you ever remove the X reference or rename it, that kind of thing, these labels can go away if the object is no longer there. All right. So I got about 15 minutes here, it looks like. So hopefully, for now, just to kind of reiterate, I created the directory structure externally. Okay. I then created the Civil 3D project, and the whole thing for the Civil 3D project is just so you can store these XML files in places. Okay. I did forget to mention one thing. I was looking at my notes. I did want to discuss what the promote was. So let me show you what that is. You guys might already know, but I just want to make sure that that is part of it. So remember, if I ever change the design or changed any of my surface, or I change my alignments, those get propagated through because they get synchronized every time you open the drawing. Now, if I click on, see, this surface has been a shortcut, right? So you get this little shortcut icon here. I can't edit it in any way. But if I promote the data reference, the promote, what it does is it physically copies the entity from the other drawing into this one and becomes part of the drawing, and it no longer is linked. So if I promote that, you'll notice here I now get my add data edit surface because it's actually part of the drawing now. So it's no longer linked. I've done that a few times where I wanted to send a drawing somewhere and they needed to have the data, and I didn't want to have to worry about the data shortcuts. They might not understand that. I could promote the object, save the drawing as something else, and then send it on the line. So promote's kind of a dangerous thing if you want the links to stay. So when you promote it, it's like the same thing as if you were to bind an X reference. Okay. And yes, I can undo, by the way. If I have promoted, I can undo, and it'll go back to a data shortcut. There's my funny little icon again. Okay. So I want to make sure that was the case. Now the other thing I was going to show you is if I needed to change the data shortcuts in any way, if I made a mistake and I moved a drawing around, if I physically move the entire project somewhere else, or how to troubleshoot if there's problems. Okay, that's usually a big problem, a big solution as well. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk a little bit about the eTransmit command that you might not know about. Well, you might know about the eTransmit command, but there's a feature in there that's useful for data shortcuts. So I am in a drawing that has, actually, you know what, maybe better than this. I'm going to go to my corridor drawing that has more data shortcuts. Okay, sometime today. Here we go. All right, thanks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the C button up here. A lot of times I'll just type in eTransmit. I think it's in Publish, right? Yeah, the eTransmit command. The reason why I want to point this out is when you do an eTransmit and you have data shortcuts, it'll actually grab the drawings appropriately from the data shortcuts. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit. So again, the eTransmit command will grab drawings, X references, anything that's linked to it. All right? But also it grabs the actual files that the entities are coming from. Okay? So it's grabbing these drawings for you at the same time. So if I were to create an eTransmit of this, it's grabbing these two because the surface and the alignments and profiles exist in another drawing. So when you do that, it'll actually grab that from you. And what's nice about that, even though they don't have the XML files, when you send this on to the next company or your client or what have you, as long as those drawings are in the same folder as the other one, very similar to an X reference, it'll find the objects and it will still work. Okay, so it's kind of similar to an X reference. I just wanted to point out that the eTransmit command will let you grab the data shortcut stuff. It's not grabbing the XML files though. So I just want to point out, just grabbing those three drawings is basically what's happening. All right, so let me close out of here. What I'm going to do is a big mistake here, and that can happen. Okay. A couple of things. First thing is I'm in the 0999 project. Now, some people do work off-site or work at home. If it's a small project, what have you, they like to take the project with them, work on it at home, and then bring it back the next day or what have you, whatever it might be. That might not always happen, but let's say it does for this example. So if I go ahead and I'm going to right-click on the 0999 project, and I'm going to copy that. So again, this is the network, and I'm going to copy it to my C drive. Okay. All right, so now I have my project here. Now if I were to open a drawing here, here's kind of the problem, is if I'm off-site, those data references won't work anymore, right? Just to reiterate again, it's a wrong folder. Go to Surfaces. Let me go to open that thing. So if I were to try to get that data reference, if I wanted to use that, what I'm going to do here is it's going to look for this name. And if you're at home or in a different site or what have you, it's not going to be able to find the K drive. Okay? So this goes the same thing if you want to archive. A lot of times we archive our projects. You move from the K drive, let's say, to the archive drive, which is L. It might be that. I don't know. You have a problem with X references, but you also have a big problem with data shortcuts. So it's going to reference back to where the original are. Okay? There is an external program that can actually edit this en masse. So let me kind of explain that. On the C drive, under my 099 and then DWG, okay, back to this thing again. If you remember, I need to repath where my data shortcuts go. Okay? So what I'm going to do is go to my All Programs, Autodesk, Civil 3 2012, there is this thing called a data shortcuts editor. What I'm going to be able to do here is look at all the data shortcuts for a particular project and see what paths are there so I can figure out what's going on. This is external to AutoCAD. So again, I'm going to go ahead and open up. If you remember, the C drive is where I put it. So C drive 099. Let me click on data shortcuts, hit OK. It's going to find any data shortcuts underneath that, and here's my list. So instead of, you can see here that they're going to be pointing to find the EG surface. It's got to find the existing topo drawing, which is here. The top surface is located in this drawing, and these 4 are located in this drawing. What I need to do is change this path. So I'm going to do this in mass. So I'm just going to highlight this over here, one of these guys, come up to this button right here, find and replace. So this path is supposed to be a different path. So where is it finding these drawings? So what I'm going to do is go back to my DWG and X reference. I'm going to basically copy and paste this so I don't have to type it. So that path is actually supposed to be this path. I guess I could have gone in each one of those and set it to C. But when I do that, if I hit replace all, it's going to change all those all in mass. So I don't have to go through the exercise. For those you might not know, is go open each drawing, remove the data reference, and create another one. Go to the next drawing, remove it, add it again. So I don't have to repath this every single time. I can do this in mass. So I want to make sure that you have that capability or that knowledge there. And again, this is external to AutoCAD. You can't get through it. Once you have this open, you can't get to it. It's only through the start button. So again, all programs, Autodesk, what did I do? Civil 3D 2012, and then the data shortcuts editor. And on a side note, just so you know, there is also a reference manager, which is very similar. What's nice about this one, this is kind of where I go through, and if X references are in the wrong path, I can do a find and replace on X reference path as well. So it's kind of similar. This is kind of a side note. This is for an X reference manager if I need to change paths for X references in mass, and this is for data shortcuts. Okay, kind of a cool little thing. And all I want to say is say yes to save that. So I guess technically, if you wanted to, I guess nobody can stop you, except for maybe a pink slip in the middle. No, I'm just kidding. When you actually open this XML editor, even though it tells you don't edit this file, okay, that file, that thing we just did, you'll notice here, it changed it to the C drive for me. So I guess technically if you came in and changed that to C or K, you could do that also. Okay. It's kind of an interesting thing. It doesn't change this shortcut name, but it still works fine. Okay. All right, so back to it. So let's see, did I miss anything? I don't think so. Yeah, so the e-transmit, the data shortcuts editor, how to do the workflow. You got the promote versus the data reference and the synchronize. Keep things small and tight. If you did not, just to show you here, this is another thing that I sent to you, but I don't know if they had printed it out for you or not, this little agenda that we had. I was looking on this. There is a service pack 2.1 for 2012, and there's also a data shortcuts hotfix. It's a very minor thing, but it does fix a few things on data shortcuts. Sometimes they disappear. I don't know if you've had that issue, but there is a hotfix for that. The hotfix you can't tell if you have installed or not without actually doing it. But just to show you here, if you got to find out if you have the service pack installed, what you would want to do is type in about at the command line. And I'll do that for you right now here. Once it's opened, just about. If I type in about, this thing pops up, and it will show you if you have Service Pack 2 installed right here. Okay, pretty piece of cake. So again, there's a Service 2.1 is what they call it. I don't know why the 0.1 is not showing. And there's also a hotfix, just in case. It's a very minor issue with data references, but it still is applicable. So again, this is kind of the recommendation that we like to use for our project structures. But again, this can be melded a little bit for how you guys work in any particular job. My recommendation would be is when the job starts, hopefully have like a CAD kickoff meeting, I guess you could call it, and discuss on how you want to do the data shortcuts. If there's a difference for that, it's always a great idea to be able to talk amongst yourself on how you want to deal with that. So again, if you want to get in contact with me, okay, we've got 2 minutes here. Let me put that thing back up. I'll put it in a drawing here, so give me a second. Okay. All right, there's my information if you want my email, if you're going to contact me directly. If you have a support question, have at it as well. I will place this recording up on our FTP site for you guys to download. I'll give the link to Mark Dickinson, and then he can promote, or he can pass that out as he sees fit, or if he wants to download it and then just tell you where it is, that's fine as well. I'm going to stick around for the next, looks like 2 minutes here, if you guys have some questions. Looks like the only question I had was that the numbers mean, but I do see the question list. If you have any questions, please let me know, and hopefully you got a little bit out of this while eating your lunch. So again, thank you so much.